Hello, and welcome to another episode of Spilling the Title Tea. Today's guest is Fredith Skaife, who is in our Oak Ridge, Tennessee branch. Welcome to the show, Fredith.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So, by now, everybody knows that interviewing Springdale team members is like one of my favorite things to do. And you have a very storied life, and you've lived all over the place. And I would love for you to share with our audience a little bit about where you started and how you ended up all the way down in good old Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Well, I was born in LA, and when we were 5, my dad used to work for UPS and he got transferred out to Houston. So we moved all up and down East Texas. And then when I was 20, he and my mom were going to move back to California, and I just had a really bad breakup. And I figured Texas was not big enough for both of us. So I moved to California with them, which is where I met my first husband. Then, you know, marriage, divorce, met my second husband, my now husband, and my sister lived in Tennessee and she had a bad breakup. So she moved to California with us and then decided that she didn't want to be in California. So she transferred. We worked for the same company and she transferred out to Tennessee. And my husband said, "You have 2 years to get us out of California or I'm going to divorce you and marry your sister." I'm not sure my sister would have been okay with that, but I went ahead and put in a transfer as well. And so we moved out here and he moved out here. He was born and raised in California, but he moved out here sight unseen
Wow,
and loves it. We love it out here.
that's awesome. I was cracking up because when you were talking about Texas not being big enough for both of you, it made me think of that old
All my
country
exes live in
song.
Texas.
Like all your exes, they live in
True. It's
Texas.
true. All my exes live in Texas. And that's
That's
why I
funny.
reside in Tennessee.
Well, moving around a lot, especially, when you're young, I think that builds so much resilience to change. Because change is hard, especially as a kid. Do you feel like that's true and that it's kind of helped you become a stronger person overall?
I think that it helped and hindered because I did have to build resilience, but it also, when you move a lot, you start to not make friends because you feel
Yeah.
like, well, what's the bother? I'm just gonna move again. But my sister and I were very close because of that. We're 15 months apart, but we became very close because all we had was each other. But I think it did help to I was very shy, so I think it helped me to come out of my shell because I've moved 36 times. Yes. Now, some of those
That
were just
hurts my heart.
short hops, but I went to 3 high schools my senior year alone.
Oh, wow. And see, that's I can't imagine that. I can't imagine moving once during my senior year period, but 3 different high schools. Wow.
And my dad wasn't even in the military.
That's that's just crazy to me. And again, moving 36 times. Listen, I'm 40 years old. I can count on one hand the amount of times I have moved in my life because I hate moving. Okay. And I'm not even probably, I will never move again. This is where I will die because I hate moving.
Hmm.
I can't
Yeah.
imagine 36
I'm really,
moves.
really good. We're really good at packing.
Well, I bet. I
My
bet you're an
husband,
expert.
yeah, not my husband though, because when we met, he lived in the same house that he lived in when he was 3. So he was in the military, but so he moved a little then, but it's a lot different than packing. So when we go to move, it's like a big, he's the man, he thinks he knows what to do, but I'm kind of the expert on that.
Yeah.
But
I
he's
think
gotten
hands down,
better. Yeah, he's gotten much better.
you have more practice than anybody I know. So I would think that puts you at expert level.
And hopefully we'll never move again.
Well, you're not allowed.
Yeah, I
So,
don't see a reason why we would. Yeah.
well, I'm one of these, people who just think that every situation that we encounter in life prepares us for, events in the future. Like nothing
That's
is
true.
wasted, you know? And I think building resilience from childhood had to help you with some of the, really scary and heartbreaking situations that you faced with some of your
Yes.
children.
Yes. So one of my second child was born with spina bifida, and when she was born, a lot of people with spina bifida also have hydrocephalus. So she had a shunt put in her head, which hydrocephalus is water on the brain, and it can cause brain damage because it just it compresses, but they put a shunt in to drain it. And they tell you
That's
that
scary.
throughout her life that they may have to have a revision because they'll either outgrow it or it might get clogged. And we had a problem with it when she was 10 months old, and she had it revised, and then she was getting better, and then all of a sudden she started having seizures, and then she went into a coma and became brain dead. So we had to make the decision to take her off life support.
That's
So
just unimaginable.
yeah, and but one thing that did come good out of it is that she was an organ donor. So her liver was donated, her heart ventricles and valves, her some parts of her eyes, her retinas and stuff. So it wasn't, I mean, yes, it's very sad, but she also helped people.
And, obviously numerous people, I mean, probably had some life changing
Yes.
surgeries and things that, could have given them who knows how many years or,
And
you know,
they could change the world.
right. I mean, we just never know how far reaching that is. But I think it's wonderful that, because that's just unimaginable to me. It's just such a devastation, the loss of a child. But the fact that you can look at it from that perspective to realize, okay, there was a bigger picture here, says a lot.
God had a plan all along because we were in a bad situation. Me and my two daughters, the one that passed away and then the older one, we were in a bad situation in my marriage, and this got us out of that marriage. Her passing away got us out of the marriage, and I needed to have left long before that.
So she kind of saved you in essence.
Yes, yes. Again, I think that God had a plan all along.
He always does. We
Yes,
don't always understand it, but he always does. He
right.
sees the bigger picture that we don't.
Exactly, exactly. But I have three other children. I went on to have two children after that. One of them was born with paralyzed vocal cords. So we spent 5 weeks in the NICU with him. And he also has Asperger's, which is a form of autism. But you would never know. He is a genius. He's brilliant.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, from what I understand about Asperger's, I think it's more of a
Social.
social, yeah, sort of thing. But yeah, usually folks with Asperger's are just extremely intelligent
Yes.
people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very. Yes. And he's just got the biggest, most generous heart.
Yeah. I love that. Well, when you were having to deal with that and him being in the NICU, um, I would have to imagine that some of those old fears had
Yes.
to have crept in, like, oh my goodness, I don't
Yeah,
want to do this again.
exactly. And it took me a little while to bond with him after he was born because I didn't get to hold him right away because he couldn't breathe. And it just, it was very reminiscent of when my daughter was born and they took her to a whole other hospital. So it was
Gosh,
tough, but we spent a lot of time in the NICU. And I remember the first time because he couldn't cry because he had paralyzed vocal cords, and you can't eat either because your vocal cords go in and out when you eat. So the first time he started crying, and he was 10 pounds. So and then a 10-pound baby in the NICU is like huge. So he's
right.
in this little isolette thing and he starts crying. And I just sat there, and the nurses are like, well, you can pick him up. And I'm like, no, he's crying. This is wonderful. But it did take me a little bit to bond with him. But now he's 6'5" and has a good job, just bought his first house. And he's got my heart. All my kids do, but he's my only son. So that's
Yeah. So
awesome.
yeah, it's just a little different.
Yeah.
Well, like so many other people throughout the world, when you have a lot of adversity that you face in life, which obviously you have had a lot, sometimes it can be difficult to cope with it and, or to at least to cope with it in healthy ways. Why don't you share a little bit about that with us?
Well, I didn't cope with it in healthy ways. I ate a lot. I, at one point, weighed 300 pounds. So I had gastric bypass. which is great for losing weight. But if you don't deal with the reason why
Mm.
you're overeating,
At root
then it
cause.
creates, yes, and then it creates other addictions like alcohol. So I did become an alcoholic for about, well, always been an alcoholic, but I was in active addiction for about 5 or 6 years. And finally, my husband said, if you don't stop, I'm going to leave you. Well, it took me a long time, even after that. I tried and tried and tried to get sober, but then I was able to finally do it. And I was sober for about 7.5 years. And then my mom passed away, and that was just a little bit too much for me, dealing with my dad and just all the sorrow. And I did relapse, but now I'm back strong. And now I feel probably healthier, mentally and emotionally, physically, spiritually than I've ever felt. I'm probably happier now than in my whole 58 years that I've ever been.
That's wonderful.
And
Well,
my
and I
job
think
has a
it's,
lot to do with that.
well, I'm glad that we can be, a part of your joy. But, I think it's important for people to realize that hard seasons don't last forever.
That's right. That's right. And if you lean on God and give him your sorrows, then he really will carry you. That you just have to give it all to him and surrender everything to him and be down on your knees and beg for help. And he's there. He's not going to desert you. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is never a word of prayer that's in vain,
This is true.
you know.
Very true.
And it doesn't have to be some eloquent speech. It can just be sobbing into
You
the
can just
carpet.
talk. Yes, be able to talk it all. He knows your heart.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, and you know what? Like I said, we always come out stronger on the other side. And of course, today, like you said, you're happier than you've ever been. You've got a wonderful husband, you've got your kids, you've got grandkids, and
Yes,
you're
3 grandkids.
involved with your church family. What advice would you give to somebody that, is sitting in a hard season? They're in a hard situation, and it's difficult to think about a time down the road where, where your life can be happy and it can be full of peace because you're in the middle of turmoil.
First of all, don't give up. Do not give up and cry. Go ahead, cry. It's okay. Journaling helped. Getting outside help. I go to a parent grief support group once a month, and
I love
being
that.
with people that know, because my husband and my kids don't know about what I went through with losing my daughter. My oldest was only 2 years old, so she doesn't really
She doesn't
remember.
remember that.
And everybody that remembers my daughter is gone now.
Oh,
My
gosh.
parents are gone. Her dad is gone. So I'm the only one. So going to this support group really helps because they can identify. So get help, cry. Like I said, just cry. Journaling really helps. Getting in church and getting close to God. That's and
Uh,
surround
I,
people who love you.
yes, I 100% agree. And how long ago was it that you lost your daughter?
It was in 1989. So back in the 1900s. So no, she was 89. She passed away in 1990. So it's been 36 years.
Yeah.
36 years.
And it's still a part of your everyday.
Yes. Sometimes it seems like a movie or a book that I read or a story that somebody told me. And then sometimes it is so raw, like it happened yesterday.
Hmm.
And you never know when that's going to hit.
Well, I think that's so important that, for other people to realize, okay, you're still going to a support group for something that you dealt with, which was obviously extremely traumatic, but it was a very long time ago.
And I didn't deal with it, which is a big reason why because I would just drink and eat my feelings away.
Yeah. But it's never too late. That's
No,
the thing. It's
never
never too
too
late
late.
to go back and bring healing to those wounds, no matter how old they are, and
Exactly.
to take the right steps to be able to cope appropriately and to be able, to move forward in a good way.
Yes. And I hope that somehow what I went through can help and comfort somebody else, knowing that other people have gone through it too.
Yeah. And isn't that what it's all about?
Yes.
That's what it's all about, the human connection and being there and realizing that, even if you feel like you're on an island, you're not. So there's nothing, my headphones are falling out. There's nothing there's nothing you can go through that somebody else hasn't dealt with at
It's
some
just a
point.
different combination
Right.
because nobody's
Right.
gone through exactly what you've gone through, but somebody has gone through everything you've gone through. It's just,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
you have to deal with it. You have to, or it's going to eat you alive.
Yeah. And I think that's great advice, that you just have to take it head on,
Mm-hmm.
because whether you deal with it up front or whether you make the choice to deal with it 20, 30, 40 years down the line,
Right.
it has to be dealt with
It does.
at some point.
It really
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. So just take the bull by the horns from the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice. I do. I think that's a great note to end on.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much
Well,
for
thank you for asking.
sharing your story. I
I
mean, I
hope
know
that
it's
it
not,
helps somebody somewhere.
yeah, it's not always easy to share real personal things like that. And I just appreciate you taking the time and being willing, to talk about it so that somebody else out there can get the help that they need.
Absolutely. Thank
All
you.
right. Well, thank you. And I want to thank our audience, as always, for joining us on another episode of Spilling the Title Tea, where we talk a little about business and a lot about life.